Lagarde.
And I'm Craig Tovey.
And welcome to Storytime with Ryan Lagarde.
And Craig Tovey.
And today's special guest reader is...
Alexa Rose.
And today's book is...
The Wee Kitten Who Sucked Her Thumb.
By Mary L. Tufts. Illustrated by Lucinda McQueen.
Let's get started.
Yeah!
The Wee Kitten Who Sucked Her Thumb.
By Mary L. Tufts. Illustrated by Lucinda McQueen.
Yeah!
Once there was a wee kitten who would suck her thumb. She sucked her thumb early in the morning when she first woke up. She sucked her thumb at playtime, noontime, nap time, and at night when she was sleeping.
Oh, I used to suck my thumb too.
I did too. Good thing we grew out of it.
Yeah.
I still dabble.
Ren, you really gotta give it up, man.
I can't.
Why do you suck your thumb?
Mother Cat asked the wee kitten one morning.
Because my thumb runs right into my mouth,
Answered wee kitten. Now this worried Mother Cat greatly. She had tried and tried to think of a good way to cure the wee kitten of this habit. She still had no answer. The go-to cures for sucking your thumb. Bitters.
Mittens.
Trains.
No, I think she's just playing with the train.
Unless...
Trains.
Choo-choo.
All aboard!
Going to St. Louis?
Ticket, please!
Mother Cat decided to go and seek advice from her friends. Taking wee kitten by the hand, she left her small house and crossed through the hedge to Mrs. Dog's house next door.
Meow.
Said Mrs. Cat to Mrs. Dog.
Can you tell me how to keep my wee kitten from sucking her thumb?
Bow wow.
Said Mrs. Dog to Mrs. Cat.
I know exactly what to do. Put bitters on her thumb. Put bitters on her thumb. Bow wow.
But I've tried that, and it has done no good.
Answered Mrs. Cat.
Thank you anyway, Mrs. Dog.
Bitters?
Check.
Did it.
Done it.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Come along with me, wee kitten.
Said Mother Cat when they had left Mrs. Dog's house.
We will visit Mrs. Cow. Perhaps she will be able to answer my question. Meow.
Said Mrs. Cat to Mrs. Cow.
Can you tell me how to keep my wee kitten from sucking her thumb?
Moo moo. Answered Mrs. Cow to Mrs. Cat. I know exactly what to do. Tie her paws behind her back. Moo moo to you, Mrs. Cat.
Oh, gracious. That can surely do no good.
Answered Mrs. Cat quickly.
Come along with me, wee kitten, and we shall visit Mrs. Horse.
Tie her hands behind her back?
She's just a wee kitten.
Not a prisoner!
Meow. Meow.
Said Mrs. Cat to Mrs. Horse.
Can you tell me how to keep my wee kitten from sucking her thumb?
Nay, nay.
Which means, yes, yes, answered Mrs. Horse to Mrs. Cat.
I know exactly what to do. Dip her paws in pepper sauce, nay, nay.
Oh, but I thought of that.
Said Mrs. Cat, shaking her head.
And it cannot work at all. Come along, wee kitten, and we'll visit Mrs. Sheep.
Of course pepper sauce isn't gonna work.
I love pepper sauce. I put it on everything.
I put it on my eggs.
I put it on my sandwich.
I put it on my hat.
Meow.
Said Mrs. Cat to Mrs. Sheep.
Can you tell me how to keep my wee kitten from sucking her thumb?
Ba-ba, answered Mrs. Sheep to Mrs. Cat. I know exactly what to do. Put mittens on her paws. Put mittens on her paws. Ba-ba.
But Mrs. Sheep, I tried that.
Said Mrs. Cat with a sigh.
And it did not work at all. Oh, come along with me, wee kitten, and we will visit Mrs. Hen.
We already tried mittens.
They're giving us everything she's already tried.
Except the train.
No one's gonna say train.
Unless they do.
Doo-doo.
Ticket, please.
Next stop, St. Louis.
Woo!
Meow.
Said Mrs. Cat to Mrs. Hen.
Can you tell me how to keep my wee kitten from sucking her thumb?
Cut, catty, cut.
Which means, certainly, certainly, answered Mrs. Hen.
I know exactly what to do. Put her in a pillowcase. Put her in a pillowcase up to her neck. Cut, catty, cut.
Oh, dear me. I could never do that.
Answered Mrs. Cat.
Come along with me, wee kitten, and we will see what Mrs. Duck has to say.
In a pillowcase up to her neck? That sounds like straight up torture.
What is wrong with that rooster?
Oh, it's a hen.
Oh.
Okay.
That explains it.
Meow,
said Mrs. Cat to Mrs. Duck.
can you tell me how to keep my wee kitten from sucking her thumb?
Quack, quack, answered Mrs. Duck to Mrs. Cat. I know exactly what to do. Spank her, quack, quack,
Mrs. Duck!
answered Mrs. Cat.
I thought you would know better. Come along with me, wee kitten, and we'll see what old Granny Pig has to say.
What? Spanking is not okay.
Not for a duck and not for a human.
Or a train.
Especially not.
Choo
Toot
choo!
toot! Get me out of here,
Take me back to St. Louis.
All aboard. Meow!
said Mrs. Cat to old Granny Pig.
Can you tell me how to keep my wee kitten from sucking her thumb?
Grunt, grunt.
Answered Granny Pig to Mrs. Cat.
I know exactly what to do. Leave her alone. Leave her alone, and she will stop sucking her thumb all by herself. Sooner or later. Sooner or later. Grunt, grunt.
Granny Pig!
Answered Mrs. Cat.
It can't be that simple, surely!
Well, I guess we are out of options because just ignoring it is not going to help.
No, I once ignored a stray hair, and then I grew this mustache.
And none of us want that.
None of us. Taking Wee Kitten by the paw, Mrs. Cat left old Granny Pig's house and headed back down Main Street. She was sure of one thing at least. She was not going to visit any more friends. It was time to take Wee Kitten home. Later that day, Mrs. Cat thought about all of the visits she had made and all the advice she had received. Mrs. Dog had suggested bitters for a Wee Kitten's thumb.
Bow wow.
Mrs. Cow said to tie her paws behind her back. Moo, moo. Mrs. Horse recommended pepper sauce.
Nay, nay.
Mrs. Sheep insisted on mittens. Bah, bah. Mrs. Hen proposed a pillowcase.
Cut him crazy.
Mrs. Duck said to spank her. Quack, quack. But Granny Pig's advice was to leave the kitten alone and do nothing at all.
Grunt, grunt.
How silly of me!
Said Mrs. Cat.
Of course, Granny Pig was right. My wee kitten will stop sucking her thumb all by herself. Sooner or later. Sooner or later. Sooner or later?
You're just gonna stick your head in the sand? I thought you were a cat, not a...
Tiger shark.
No, it's ostrich.
Ostrich shark.
That sounds terrifying.
From that day on, Mother Cat did not waste another minute worrying about whether or not the wee kitten was sucking her thumb. Mother Cat busied herself instead doing all the things that mother cats do and loving her kitten all the while. Until one day, Wee Kitten no longer sucked her thumb. No one was sure how it had happened or when she had stopped. The fact was that the wee kitten didn't want to suck her thumb any longer. She just didn't want to anymore. Wow, Alexa, looks like some problems just solved themselves.
That's great. Ryan,
I don't want to anymore.
sooner or later.
Sooner or later, love is gonna let ya. Sooner or later, love is gonna win.
The
Wee Kitten Who Sucked Her Thumb.
By Mary L. Tufts, illustrated by Lucinda McQueen.
Yeah. Well, thanks for watching Storytime with Ryan Lagod
And Craig Tovey.
and our special guest reader.
Alexa Rose.
We'll see you next time.
Train time, all aboard! Doot doot!
Ticket, please.
Next stop, St. Louis.
Ticket.
Ticket, ticket, ticket.